Judged by her limitations, the alien princess was cast aside until the human warrior saw the truth. Princess Zixara sat alone in the great library of the Crystal Palace. Around her, thousands of ancient books and data crystals filled the tall shelves that reached up to the glowing ceiling. She carefully turned the pages of an old star map, her fingers tracing the routes between distant worlds. This was her life now, reading, studying, and being forgotten. The princess looked nothing like her powerful brothers and sisters. While they stood tall and proud with eyes that glowed bright blue when using their mind powers, Zixara appeared, small and ordinary. Her eyes never glowed. Her mind could not reach across space to speak with others. She could not lift objects with her thoughts or break stone with her will. In the Velthari Empire, these telepathic powers meant everything. Warriors could destroy enemy ships with focused thoughts. Generals could command entire fleets by speaking, mind to mind across the galaxy. Scientists could move atoms and build incredible machines using only their mental strength. But Zixara had been born different. The palace doctors called her condition mind silence, a rare genetic problem that blocked her telepathic abilities completely. She is broken, her father, the emperor, had said when she turned 16 and still showed no psychic gifts. Let her stay in the archives where she cannot embarrass the royal family. So here she remained, day after day, reading the forgotten histories that no one else cared about. She knew every star chart, every ancient battle plan, every old treaty and trade agreement. The other royals thought this knowledge was useless. Why read about old wars when you could fight new ones with mind power? Why study ancient machines when telepathic technology was so much better? Zixara did not agree, but no one asked for her opinion. The morning started like any other. She was reading about the old defensive systems that protected the Empire's borders, before telepathic shields were invented. The book was thick and dusty, written in the ancient language that few people still understood. But as she read, alarms began to sound throughout the palace. The crystal walls flashed red. Emergency lights blinked in patterns that meant only one thing: invasion. Zixara dropped her book and ran to the nearest window. Outside, the sky was filled with dark ships that looked like metal insects. They moved in perfect formation, their weapons already firing at the great shield that protected the capital world. The shield flickered and sparked with each hit. "The Drakmor Horde," she whispered, recognizing the ship designs from her history books. The Drakmor were a savage race that conquered worlds for sport. They had tried to invade the Empire many times before, but the Velthari's superior mind powers had always driven them away. But something was wrong. The telepathic warriors who usually rose to meet any threat were not fighting back. Through the window, she could see them on the palace landing platforms, holding their heads in pain. Their eyes, which should have been blazing with psychic energy, were dim and confused. Zixara ran through the hallways toward the war room. Servants and guards rushed past her, all heading for shelter. She pushed through the crowds until she reached the great doors of the command center. The guards tried to stop her. "Princess, you should be in the safe rooms," one said. "I need to know what is happening," she replied. "This is no place for—" The guard began, but General Kethmore, her older brother, appeared at the door. "Let her pass," Kethmore said tiredly. "She cannot make things any worse." Inside the war room, chaos ruled. The great holographic display showed Drakmor ships attacking 12 different worlds at once. Velthari commanders stood around the table, but none of them were giving orders. They looked lost and afraid. "Report," Emperor Thaindar commanded, as he entered the room. Zixara pressed herself against the wall, trying to stay invisible. "The enemy is using some kind of jamming technology," General Vextar explained. "We cannot reach our ships with our minds. Our telepathic weapons are not working. It is as if our powers have been turned off." The Emperor's face turned pale. That is impossible. Yet it is happening, my lord. We have lost contact with our entire fleet. Our ground forces cannot coordinate without mind speech. We are fighting blind and deaf. Panic filled the room. For 1,000 years, the Velthari had depended on their psychic abilities for everything. Their weapons needed telepathic control. Their ships were designed to be flown by mental commands. Even their basic communication systems required mind-to-mind contact. "What do we do?" someone asked. Before anyone could answer, an aide rushed into the room. "Your Majesty, there is a human ship requesting permission to land. They say they are here to help." "Humans?" General Kethmore spat. "Those primitive creatures? What could they possibly do against the Drakmor?" "They claim to be mercenaries," the aide continued. "Their leader says they have experience fighting enemies who use psionic dampening fields." The Emperor looked around the room at his helpless generals. "We have no choice. Let them land." An hour later, the humans arrived in the war room. There were only 5 of them, but they moved with confidence that the Velthari had lost. Their leader was a man of medium height, with dark hair and calm eyes. He wore simple military clothing with no decoration, except for a small metal badge on his chest. "I am Captain Marcus Chen of the Terran Federation Marine Corps," he said in accented but clear Velthari language. "We received your distress call and came as quickly as possible." "Captain," the Emperor said formally, "we welcome your assistance, though I fear there is little you can do. The enemy has somehow blocked our telepathic abilities. Without them, we are defenseless." Marcus nodded. "We have seen this before. The Drakmor have been using psionic dampening technology for several years now. They specifically target telepathic species because most become helpless when their mental abilities are suppressed." "And you can fight them?" General Vextar asked with doubt in his voice. "Humans are not telepathic," Marcus replied simply. "Their weapons do not affect us. We fight, using conventional tactics, strategy, and adaptability, things that work regardless of psychic abilities." As the adults talked, Marcus's eyes wandered around the room. They passed over the proud generals and the worried emperor. Then they stopped on the small figure pressed against the wall. For a moment, his gaze met Zixara's, and she saw something there that she had never seen before. Not pity for her weakness, but interest in her potential. "Now," Marcus continued, "we need to understand your defensive capabilities, supply lines, and territorial layout. Who among you knows these details best?" The generals looked at each other uncertainly. They had always relied on telepathic scouts and mind-linked sensors. None of them had bothered to memorize such basic information. From her corner, Zixara cleared her throat softly. "The main supply depot is located in Section 7 of the underground complex," she said quietly. "The emergency evacuation routes run through the old mining tunnels that connect to the spaceport. There are also 3 hidden landing platforms that are not shown on the current maps." Every head in the room turned to stare at her. Marcus stepped forward with interest. "And you know this how?" he asked gently. "I have read all the architectural plans and historical documents," Zixara answered. "They are in the archives." General Kethmore made a dismissive sound. "My sister spends her time with old books because she cannot do anything useful." But Marcus continued to look at her with those calm, assessing eyes. "Princess, would you be willing to share this information with my team? It could be very valuable." Before she could answer, the Emperor waved his hand. "Captain, surely you do not need to waste time with her. Our military advisors can provide whatever assistance you require." "With respect, Your Majesty," Marcus said, politely, "your military advisors just admitted they do not know their own supply lines. The princess appears to have information we need." For the first time in her life, someone had called her knowledge valuable instead of useless. Zixara felt something stir in her chest, a feeling she had almost forgotten. Hope. The war for the Velthari Empire had begun, and perhaps finally she might have a role to play in saving her people. 3 days after the humans arrived, Captain Marcus Chen found Princess Zixara in the palace archives again. She was surrounded by dozens of open books and data crystals, working by the light of a small reading lamp. Maps covered the large table, showing every tunnel, every building, and every defense system in the capital city. "Princess," Marcus said quietly, not wanting to startle her. "May I join you?" She looked up, surprised. Since their first meeting, none of the military leaders had spoken to her again. They were too busy arguing about strategies they could not implement without their telepathic powers. "Of course, Captain," she replied, moving some books to make space for him at the table. Marcus sat down and studied the maps. "These are remarkably detailed. How long did it take you to gather all this information?" "About 6 hours," Zixara said simply. "I know where everything is kept in the archives. Most of these documents have not been read for decades." 6 hours? Marcus looked impressed. "My intelligence team would need weeks to collect this much. Data about an unfamiliar city. You have a gift for organization and analysis." Zixara felt warmth spread through her chest. No one had ever called her abilities a gift before. "Can you show me the underground evacuation routes?" Marcus asked, pointing to the map. She traced the paths with her finger. "There are 7 main tunnels that lead from the residential areas to the spaceport, but 3 of them pass too close to the main power grid. If the Drakmor target the power stations, those routes could be blocked by debris." "Which routes would be safest?" "These 4, she said, marking them with a stylus. "They follow the old mining shafts that were carved into solid rock. They also have multiple exits in case one becomes blocked." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "What about supplies? If we need to evacuate civilians, they will need food and water." "There are emergency supply caches in the tunnels," Zixara explained. "They were installed 50 years ago but should still be functional. However, they only have enough resources for about 10,000 people for 3 days." "And how many civilians live in the danger zones?" Zixara's fingers moved quickly across a data pad, calculating numbers. "Approximately 47,000 in the residential districts closest to the palace, another 33,000 in the commercial sectors. If we include the outer settlements, nearly 100,000. People could need evacuation." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You calculated that in your head?" "Yes. I have read the census reports many times." "Princess, has anyone ever told you that you think like a military strategist?" Before she could answer, alarms began to sound, again. Through the windows, they could see explosions in the distance. The Drakmor were beginning their main assault. Marcus stood quickly. "I need to get to the command center. Will you come with me?" "Me?" Zixara looked uncertain. "I am not a soldier." "No, but you know things that could save lives. Please." Together they ran through the corridors to the war room. Inside, chaos ruled again. The holographic display showed Drakmor ground forces landing in 12 different locations around the city. Velthari defenders were trying to fight back, but without their telepathic coordination, they were confused and disorganized. "Status report," Marcus called. Out. General Vextar looked grim. "They have landed assault troops in the northern districts. Our forces are falling back, but we cannot coordinate a proper defense. We keep losing communication with our units." "What about evacuation?" Marcus asked. "Evacuation?" General Kethmore looked puzzled. "We are warriors. We do not run from battle." "You are warriors without your primary weapons," Marcus said firmly. "Your people are in danger. Some tactical retreat could save thousands of lives." "The evacuation routes are not clearly marked," another general complained. "Our people do not know where to go." Marcus turned to Zixara. "Princess, Could you help coordinate civilian movement using the tunnel system you showed me? All eyes turned to her. She felt small under their stares, but Marcus's encouraging nod gave her courage. Yes, she said softly, then louder. Yes, I can do that. Absolutely not, General Kethmore protested. She is not trained for such responsibility. Neither are any of you for this type of warfare, Marcus replied calmly. Princess, what do you need? Zixara moved to the display controls. Her fingers flew over the buttons as she brought up detailed city maps that most of the generals had never seen before. We need to divide the evacuation into 5 phases, she explained, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. First, we evacuate the families with young children from sectors 7 through 12. They will use tunnel routes Alpha and Beta. Second, for the next 10 minutes, she outlined a complete evacuation plan. She identified safe gathering points, calculated movement times, and even suggested how to distribute supplies along the routes. The generals listened in amazement as their useless princess demonstrated a deeper understanding of urban logistics than any of them possessed. This could work, General Vextar admitted grudgingly, but who will guide the civilians? Our soldiers are needed to fight. I will go myself, Zixara said. I know every tunnel by heart. Too dangerous, Kethmore objected. I will accompany her, Marcus volunteered. My team can provide protection while the princess guides the evacuation. Emperor Thaindar, who had been silent during the discussion, finally spoke. Do it. Proceed with the princess's plan. 3 hours later, Zixara found herself crawling through dusty maintenance tunnels with Captain Marcus and 2 of his soldiers. Behind them, a long line of frightened civilians followed quietly through the darkness. She had already guided 600 people to safety using routes that the Drakmor could never find. Left turn ahead, she whispered to Marcus. Then 50 meters to the emergency exit. You really do know these tunnels perfectly, he whispered back. How many times have you been down here? This is my first time actually walking through them, she admitted. But I have studied the architectural plans so many times that I can see the layout in my mind. Marcus stopped crawling and turned to look at her in the dim light. You memorized the entire tunnel system from drawings? Is that unusual? Princess, most people cannot do what you just did. You have an extraordinary memory and spatial reasoning ability. They reached the exit and helped the civilians climb out into a hidden valley outside the city. As the last family emerged from the tunnel, explosions echoed from the direction of the palace. The Drakmor were getting closer. We saved 800 people today, Marcus said as they prepared to return for another group. 800 lives because you knew something that nobody else knew. But I still cannot fight like a real warrior, Zixara said sadly. Marcus handed her a small device, a human communication radio. Princess, there are many different ways to be a warrior. You have been fighting today with your mind, your knowledge, and your courage. That is exactly what we need. Over the following days, Marcus began teaching her basic human military tactics. Unlike Velthari warfare, which relied on overwhelming psychic force, human strategies emphasized flexibility, deception, and using terrain advantages. Zixara learned quickly, her analytical mind grasping concepts that confused the telepathic generals. Why do humans fight so differently? She asked during one training session. Because we had to, Marcus explained. Humans are not the strongest or fastest species in the galaxy. We survived by being smarter, more adaptable, and more creative than our enemies. Like I had to be, because I could not use telepathy. Exactly. Your limitation forced you to develop other skills, skills that your people are going to need now. By the end of the week, even the Imperial Court was beginning to notice their success. While Velthari military forces struggled to adapt to conventional warfare, the princess and her human advisor had evacuated over 30,000 civilians without losing a single life. General Vextar approached Zixara after the morning briefing. Princess, your evacuation procedures saved my own family yesterday. I owe you an apology. I have been wrong about your value to our empire. Thank you, General, she replied quietly. As he walked away, Marcus smiled at her. How does it feel to have your abilities recognized? Strange, she admitted, but good. For the first time, I feel like I might actually be able to help my people. You are helping them, more than you know. Looking at the tactical displays, showing successful evacuations and organized resistance, Zixara began to believe that maybe, just maybe, her differences could become her greatest strength. 2 weeks into the war, Princess Zixara stood before the largest tactical display in the command center. Numbers, ship positions, and supply reports flowed across the screen faster than most people could read. But her eyes tracked every detail, her mind processing the information like a living computer. Enemy patrol group moving through Sector 4, she announced without looking away from the display. 12 ships heading toward the mining station. They will arrive in 47 minutes. General Vextar checked his instruments. Confirmed. How did you calculate that so quickly? I can see their movement pattern, Zixara explained. Based on their current speed and the gravitational effects of the nearby moons, their arrival time is predictable. Captain Marcus Chen watched with growing amazement. Over the past 2 weeks, he had seen Zixara develop into something extraordinary. While her people struggled to fight without telepathy, she had become their most valuable strategic asset. Her ability to analyze complex battlefield data was beyond anything he had ever witnessed. Princess, Marcus said, we have reports from 3 different battle zones. Can you coordinate our response? Zixara nodded and began working at multiple control panels at once. Her fingers moved with practiced speed as she tracked friendly ships, monitored supply lines, and calculated optimal attack routes. Within minutes, she had developed a comprehensive battle plan that would coordinate forces across half the star system. Send the 3rd Fleet to engage the enemy at the asteroid field, she instructed. The 4th Fleet should position themselves near the gas giant and wait for my signal. Ground forces Alpha and Beta need to withdraw to defensive position 7 and establish crossfire patterns. What about the civilians trapped on Station Gamma? General Kethmore asked. Zixara paused, considering multiple factors at once. Rescue. Ship formation Delta 7 can reach them if they take the route through the stellar debris field. The Drakmor will not expect us to navigate that area because it requires precise manual piloting instead of telepathic control. Manual piloting through a debris field is extremely dangerous, Kethmore protested. Captain Chen's pilots have experience with such navigation, Zixara replied calmly. Human pilots train for situations where technology fails. This is exactly what they are prepared for. Marcus smiled. In 2 weeks, the princess had learned to think like a human strategist while maintaining her own unique analytical gifts. As the battle unfolded according to her plan, Zixara made a discovery that would change everything. While reviewing casualty reports in the archives that evening, she found herself in a section she had never explored before, the pre-telepathic military records. Marcus, she called excitedly as he entered the library, you need to see this. She led him to a collection of ancient technical manuals that had been sealed in crystal containers for over 1,000 years. The books described weapons and defensive systems from the time before the Velthari developed psychic abilities. Look at this, she said, opening a manual filled with detailed engineering drawings. These are plans for ships that do not require telepathic control. And these weapons, they were designed to work with conventional targeting systems. Marcus studied the designs with growing interest. These look incredibly advanced. Why did your people stop using them? When we developed telepathy, these technologies seemed primitive, Zixara explained. Telepathic control was faster and more efficient. But now they could be exactly what we need, Marcus finished. Princess, If we could build ships like these, they would be immune to the Drakmor's psionic dampening fields. Over the following days, Zixara worked with Marcus's engineering team to understand the ancient designs. Her years of studying old, technical documents proved invaluable as she translated archaic terms and explained forgotten scientific principles. "This propulsion system is fascinating," said Lieutenant Sarah Park, one of Marcus's engineers. "It combines Velthari crystal technology with conventional thrust mechanisms. We could build something like this using modern materials." "The weapon systems are even more interesting," added Sergeant Kumar. "They use guided projectiles instead of energy beams. No telepathic control required." Zixara felt excitement building as she realized the possibilities. If we combine these ancient designs with human engineering techniques, we could create ships that the Drakmor cannot detect or disable. Working together, the human Velthari team began constructing prototype vessels in hidden shipyards deep within the asteroid belt. The new ships used stealth technology that Marcus's people provided, combined with the nearly forgotten Velthari engineering that Zixara had rediscovered. The first test flight was a complete success. The hybrid ship moved through space like a ghost, invisible to both Drakmor sensors and telepathic detection methods. More importantly, it could fight effectively using conventional weapons that no enemy countermeasures could disable. "We should call them ghost ships," Zixara suggested as they watched the prototype return from its mission. "Perfect name," Marcus agreed. "How quickly can we build more?" According to the ancient production schedules, a full shipyard could produce 12 vessels per month, Zixara calculated. But that was using old methods. With human manufacturing techniques, we might be able to triple that rate. As word of the ghost ships spread through the Velthari fleet, something unexpected happened. Soldiers and commanders who had previously dismissed Zixara began seeking her advice. Her reputation as a strategic genius was growing, but not everyone was happy about it. During a staff meeting 3 weeks later, General Kethmore finally confronted his sister directly. "This has gone far enough," he announced in front of the entire War Council. "We are warriors, not archaeologists. We should be fighting with honor, not hiding behind ancient relics and alien tactics." The room fell silent. Everyone knew that Kethmore was questioning not just their strategy, but his sister's authority to make military decisions. Zixara stood quietly for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Then she walked to the tactical display and activated a real-time view of the current battle situation. "Brother," she said calmly, "our honorable fighting has cost us 12 worlds and over 2 million soldiers. Would you prefer to continue losing with honor or start winning with intelligence?" "We are Velthari," Kethmore declared. "We do not hide from our enemies." "You are right," Zixara agreed. "We do not hide. We adapt." She began outlining a new battle plan on the display, her fingers moving with confident precision. "Tomorrow, the Drakmor will attack the industrial complex at Kepler Station. They expect us to defend it with conventional forces that they can easily defeat. Instead, we will give them exactly what they want to see." Her plan was brilliant, in its simplicity. The Velthari would appear to defend the station using traditional tactics, allowing the Drakmor to think they were winning. Meanwhile, ghost ship squadrons would attack the enemy's supply lines and command vessels from unexpected directions. "The Drakmor will realize they have been outmaneuvered only when it is too late," Zixara concluded. "We will destroy their entire attack fleet while appearing to lose a single battle." General Vextar studied the plan carefully. "This could work. The timing would have to be perfect." "It will be," Zixara said with quiet confidence. "I have calculated every variable." The battle the next day unfolded exactly as she had predicted. The Drakmor attacked the station with overwhelming force, confident in their victory. But as their ships moved into position, ghost ship squadrons emerged from asteroid shadows and nebula clouds, striking with devastating precision. Within 3 hours, the enemy attack fleet was completely destroyed. Not a single Velthari ship was lost. As the reports came in, the war room erupted in celebration. For the first time since the invasion began, they had achieved a total victory against the Drakmor. General Kethmore approached his sister slowly. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "And my respect. You have proven yourself a true leader." "Thank you, brother," Zixara replied. "But this is only the beginning. We have much more work to do." Marcus watched the exchange with pride. The forgotten princess had become the strategic mind that her people desperately needed. More importantly, she had found the confidence to believe in herself. "What are you thinking about?" Zixara asked, noticing his expression. "I was thinking that sometimes the greatest warriors are not the ones who fight with their fists," Marcus replied. "Sometimes they are the ones who fight with their minds." For the first time since the war began, Zixara allowed herself to smile. The tide was finally turning, and she was no longer the princess that no one noticed. She was becoming something far more important, the strategist who would save her people. Princess Zixara stared at the intelligence report in disbelief. The words seemed impossible, but the data was clear. The Drakmor had built something that could destroy the Velthari civilization forever. "A psionic amplifier the size of a moon," she said quietly, reading the report aloud to Captain Marcus Chen. "Capable of permanently removing telepathic abilities from every Velthari in the star system." Marcus studied the surveillance images on her datapad. The enemy weapon looked like a massive metal sphere covered in antenna arrays and energy collectors. It floated in space surrounded by the largest Drakmor fleet anyone had ever seen. "When they activate this device," Zixara continued, "my people will lose their telepathic powers forever. Not just blocked like the dampening fields, completely destroyed." "I am sorry, Princess," Marcus said gently. "This must be terrifying. For your people." But Zixara was not looking terrified. She was studying the technical specifications with the intense focus that Marcus had learned to recognize. Her analytical mind was working on something. "Marcus," she said slowly, "what if this is not a disaster? What if this is exactly the opportunity we need? I do not understand." Zixara stood and began pacing around the room, her excitement growing. "Think about it. Right now, the Drakmor have 2 advantages over us. First, their dampening technology makes our telepathic warriors helpless. Second, they outnumber our conventional forces." "Yes, but if they destroy your people's abilities permanently, then the playing field becomes completely level," Zixara finished. "The Drakmor will lose their technological advantage. Their entire battle strategy depends on the fact that most telepathic species become helpless when their powers are blocked. But what happens when nobody has telepathic powers?" Marcus began to understand. "They will have to fight using conventional methods." "Exactly. And who has been training the Velthari to fight without telepathy for the past month?" "You have," Marcus said with growing amazement. "Princess, are you suggesting we should let them activate this weapon?" "Not just let them," Zixara replied, her eyes bright with determination. "We should protect it while they do." Within hours, Zixara had called together every military leader in the Empire. The great war room was packed with generals, admirals, and planetary governors. The air hummed with tension as she prepared to present the most dangerous plan in Velthari history. "Fellow warriors," she began, her voice carrying new authority that no one questioned anymore. "The enemy believes they are about to win our war by taking away our greatest strength. I propose we help them do exactly that." Shocked murmurs filled the room. General Kethmore looked concerned. "Sister, surely you cannot mean—" "I mean we should ensure the amplifier activates successfully," Zixara said firmly. "But on our terms, when we are ready for it." She activated the main display, showing a complex battle plan that covered 12 star systems. For 1 month, I have been teaching our forces to fight like humans, to use strategy instead of raw power, to adapt instead of relying on superior abilities. Tomorrow, we will discover if those lessons were enough. General Vextar studied the plan carefully. This is incredibly risky. If we are wrong about our ability to fight without telepathy, then we lose, Zixara admitted. But if we are right, we gain something the Drakmor cannot match. The element of surprise combined with superior tactics. Admiral Thexuna raised a concern. Princess, coordinating a battle across multiple star systems without telepathic communication will be nearly impossible. Not impossible, Zixara replied. Difficult, but not impossible. Humans have been doing it for centuries. We will use quantum communication arrays, coded radio signals, and predetermined timing sequences. I have calculated contingency plans for every possible scenario. Emperor Thaindar, who had been silent during the presentation, finally spoke. Daughter, you are asking me to gamble the survival of our entire civilization on your strategic theories. Father, our civilization is already doomed if we continue fighting the old way, Zixara replied honestly. The Drakmor will eventually overwhelm us through sheer numbers. This amplifier gives us one chance to change the rules of the game completely. Marcus stepped forward. Your Majesty, I have fought alongside the princess for weeks now. Her strategic abilities are extraordinary. If anyone can coordinate this kind of complex operation, it is her. The debate continued for hours, but eventually the decision was made. They would implement Zixara's plan. The next day would bring the greatest test of her abilities and the ultimate proof of whether human-style warfare could save the Velthari Empire. As the final battle began, Zixara stood in the central command center surrounded by dozens of communication screens and data displays. Around her, human technicians and Velthari officers worked together to coordinate the most complex military operation in galactic history. Drakmor fleet moving into position around the amplifier, reported Lieutenant Park. They are beginning the activation sequence. All units, commence Operation Ghost Storm, Zixara commanded through the quantum communication array. Across the star system, the plan unfolded with precise timing. Ghost ship squadrons moved through asteroid fields and nebula clouds, approaching Drakmor positions from unexpected angles. Conventional Velthari fleets took positions that appeared defensive, but were actually carefully planned to funnel the enemy into specific zones. Amplifier charging to 30%, Park announced. Psionic dampening effects increasing. Zixara watched as her telepathic officers began to struggle with their mental abilities. Soon, they would be no different from humans in terms of psychic power. Everything would depend on training, strategy, and determination. Phase 2, initiate, she ordered. Marcus led a desperate assault on the Drakmor flagship, his human pilots weaving through enemy fire with skills that no telepathic race had ever needed to develop. Meanwhile, Zixara coordinated supporting attacks from 6 different directions, each time to arrive at the exact moment when it would have maximum impact. Amplifier at 70%, Park called out. Telepathic abilities failing across all friendly units. Excellent, Zixara said calmly. Now we fight as equals. The battle raged for hours. Without their telepathic advantages, both sides had to rely on conventional tactics, skilled piloting, and strategic thinking. But the Velthari had spent weeks preparing for this moment, while the Drakmor had never imagined fighting without their technological superiority. Enemy command ship is taking heavy damage, reported Sergeant Kumar from Marcus's assault team. Captain Chen has reached their bridge. All units, execute final phase, Zixara commanded. The climax came when the amplifier reached full power. Across the entire star system, every telepathic ability vanished completely. But instead of chaos, the Velthari forces continued their coordinated attacks with clockwork precision. Zixara had prepared them for this moment, training them to fight like humans when their telepathy failed. The Drakmor, however, were completely unprepared. Their entire military doctrine had been built around defeating telepathic enemies. When faced with opponents who fought with human-style tactics and determination, they could not adapt quickly. Enough! Enemy flagship is surrendering. Marcus's voice came through the communication system. Repeat, enemy command has surrendered. All Drakmor fleets are requesting terms, Admiral Thexuna reported in amazement. Princess, we have won. As reports of victory poured in from across the star system, Zixara allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The plan had worked. By accepting their limitations and learning to fight like humans, the Velthari had discovered a strength they never knew they possessed. Princess, General Kethamor approached with deep respect in his voice, you have saved our people. How can we ever repay such wisdom? By remembering this lesson, brother, Zixara replied, true strength does not come from the powers we are born with, but from what we choose to do when those powers are taken away. The ultimate test was over, and the Forgotten Princess had proven that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from being stronger than your enemy, but from being smarter, more adaptable, and more determined to survive. 6 months after the war ended, Princess Zixara stood on the balcony of the newly built Strategic Command Center. The building rose from the Crystal Palace gardens like a bridge between the old world and the new. Through its transparent walls, she could see Velthari and human engineers working together, designing ships that combined the best of both technologies. The war had ended not with the destruction of the psionic amplifier, but with its complete activation, just as Zixara had predicted. When all telepathic abilities disappeared permanently, the Drakmor lost their only advantage. The surrender had come within hours of the final battle, when their commanders realized they could not match the tactical flexibility that human training had given the Velthari forces. The Council is ready for you, Strategic Chancellor, said Lieutenant Sarah Park, who now served as Zixara's chief technical advisor, Strategic Chancellor. The title still felt strange to Zixara, but she had grown into it. The position had been created specifically for her after the war, recognizing that the Empire needed leaders who could think beyond traditional telepathic warfare. She walked through the corridors of the command center, past walls lined with portraits of great Velthari warriors from history. Soon, there would be new portraits, strategists, engineers, and thinkers who had proven that mental power took many different forms. The Imperial Council chamber had been redesigned as well. The old circular arrangement, which had been perfect for telepathic communication, had been replaced with a more practical layout that encouraged discussion and debate. When Zixara entered, she found representatives from every world in the Empire waiting for her weekly strategic briefing. Chancellor, Emperor Thaindar greeted her formally. Since the war, their relationship had changed completely. He no longer saw her as his broken daughter, but as the brilliant leader who had saved their civilization. Your Majesty, honored counselors, Zixara replied, taking her place at the head of the conference table. Today we review the progress of our cultural adaptation programs. She activated the display, showing statistics from across the Empire. The new academies are exceeding all expectations. We now have over 50,000 Velthari enrolled in non-telepathic skill development programs. Engineering, strategic analysis, conventional piloting, and technological research departments are all reporting record applications. Admiral Thexuna leaned forward with interest. What about the resistance movements? Some of our people still believe we should try to restore our telepathic abilities. The resistance groups are shrinking each month, Zixara reported honestly. As more Velthari discover their capabilities in other areas, fewer of them see the loss of telepathy as a tragedy. We are learning that we are much more than our psychic powers ever defined us to be. General Vextar nodded approvingly. The new military training programs are producing excellent results. Our forces are now more flexible and adaptable than they ever were during the telepathic era. Speaking of training, Zixara continued, Captain Chen has officially accepted our offer to establish the Human Velthari Joint Military Academy. Construction will begin next month on a facility that will train officers from both species in combined tactical approaches. Through the chamber windows, she could see the construction site where the academy would be built. Marcus had initially planned to return to human space after the war, but the opportunity to create something entirely new had convinced him to stay. More importantly, Zixara had hoped he would stay. His friendship and mentorship had become too valuable to lose. Chancellor, asked Governor Plexdan from the outer colonies, what about economic development? The transition away from telepathic technology has been expensive. Zixara smiled. Actually, the economic benefits are becoming clear. Our new hybrid technologies are attracting interest from dozens of alien species. The ghost ships alone have generated trade contracts worth millions of credits. Species that previously avoided us because they feared our telepathic abilities are now eager to establish diplomatic relationships. It was true. The Velthari Empire was discovering that their reputation as a telepathic warrior race had made many peaceful species uncomfortable. Without that intimidating reputation, they were finding new opportunities for trade, cultural exchange, and scientific cooperation. The research partnership with the Terran Federation has been particularly beneficial, Zixara continued. Human scientists are fascinated by our crystal technology, while our engineers are learning new manufacturing techniques that will revolutionize our industrial capabilities. As the meeting concluded, Zixara felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The Empire was not just surviving the loss of telepathy, it was thriving. The changes had forced every Velthari to discover new aspects of themselves, just as she had been forced to do throughout her life. After the council session, she walked to her favorite place in the new building, the memorial garden dedicated to those who had died in the war. In the center stood a crystal monument that told the story of the conflict, but more importantly, it celebrated the idea that strength comes in many forms. "Busy day?" asked a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Marcus approaching, wearing the new uniform of the Joint Academy. "Always busy, but good busy," she replied. "How are the academy preparations going?" "Better than expected. We have applications from young people across both our species who want to learn integrated tactical approaches. Some of them specifically requested to study under the strategist who defeated the Drakmor." Zixara felt warmth spread through her chest. "I had help with that victory." "You had guidance," Marcus corrected gently. "But the strategic brilliance was all yours. You took human concepts and made them into something uniquely Velthari." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching ships land and take off from the nearby spaceport. Half of them were the new hybrid designs that combined human and Velthari engineering. The sight filled Zixara with hope for the future. "Do you ever miss it?" Marcus asked quietly. "The telepathy, I mean." Zixara considered the question carefully. "I never had it to miss," she said finally. "But I have watched my people grieve for their lost abilities, and I have seen them discover new ones. I think we are becoming something better than we were before." "How so?" "When we had telepathy, we became dependent on it. We stopped growing, stopped learning, stopped challenging ourselves. We thought we were perfect because we had this one great ability. But perfection means there is no room for improvement." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "And now? Now we know we are not perfect, so we keep trying to become better. We learn from other species like humans. We develop new skills. We discover that intelligence takes many forms, and each one has value." A message alert chimed on Zixara's communication device. She checked it and smiled. The first class of students has graduated from the Accelerated Strategic Analysis Program. 25. Young Velthari who have learned to think like tacticians instead of telepaths. That is wonderful news. It is more than wonderful, Zixara said, her voice filled with quiet pride. It means that other young Velthari who feel different or limited will have examples to follow. They will know that their differences might actually be their greatest strengths. As the sun set behind the crystal spires of the capital city, Zixara thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had started as the forgotten princess who could not use telepathy. Now she was the strategic chancellor of an empire that had learned to value every form of intelligence. "Marcus," she said suddenly, "thank you." "For what?" "For seeing something in me that my own people could not see. For teaching me that limitations can become strengths. For showing me that there are many ways to be a warrior." Marcus smiled. "You taught me something too, princess." "What is that?" "That sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we stop looking for what we expect to find and start appreciating what is actually there." Together, they watched the stars appear in the darkening sky. Each point of light represented possibilities. New worlds to explore, new species to meet, new ways of thinking to discover. The Velthari Empire was no longer a civilization built on the single foundation of telepathic power. It had become something richer, more diverse, and more resilient. Zixara had spent her entire life being judged by her limitations. Now she understood that those limitations had prepared her to lead her people into a future where every individual's unique abilities would be valued and celebrated. The Forgotten Princess had become the architect of a new era, and the galaxy was a better place because someone had finally seen the truth of her potential.